live, but Instagram takes a second. All right, no preview coming up yet. I think I'm just going to hit go live on Instagram. Oh, there it is. All right. All right. I think Instagram. Yep, Instagram looks good. Alia's going to text me. I have my ringer off, but Alia's going to text me and let me know if the sound is okay. It's really windy out here, but it is so beautiful. I don't want to be inside unless I absolutely have to. So I may have to shut the stream down and then head inside and start again. I hope not. It's so nice out here. Just waiting to see if I get a response from Alia or anybody else. If somebody else comes on and the wind is too much, just let me know. Yeah, I don't think anybody's in yet, but I actually don't trust StreamYard here. And I really can only see comments. Well, I've actually never seen comments, so I know some destinations that I'm streaming to will not show comments here. I mean, it claims that Facebook, okay, Instagram is not going to show comments. YouTube shows comments. So I think maybe I just haven't had comments on any of the platforms that allow them. So I am here today to talk about autonomy and choice and destiny, light topics. I recognize that for most of my life, my adult life, my really down into to my earliest memories, I thought there was some kind of ideal path that I could walk. I thought there was one way, or maybe not even just one way, but there were kind of some paths that were going to lead to joy, that were going to lead to happiness. There were paths that were going to lead to pain. And it was just about making the right choices. I could choose one of the good paths or I can choose one of the bad paths, and then my emotional state is going to result from that. And I discovered for myself, at least, that wasn't the case. It wasn't the action I was taking. And sure, there are some actions that are going to lead to pain. But it wasn't my choice of action that was the primary determining factor of whether I was going to be happy, whether I was going to be anxious, depressed. Oh, great. Yeah, Ali is saying that the wind is not audible. Great. Just let me know in the comments. On Instagram, I won't see the comments, but you could comment on Facebook. I believe, I know YouTube, you could comment. I think comments on X will also show. But I discovered that it wasn't my actions that were so important. I was obsessed with the right action. I was anxious, depressed. I felt like there was something more to life. Like there was no way that wallowing in my depression and my anxiety was kind of my destiny. I didn't want to believe that. I had a positive attitude despite the pain, despite the daily struggles. But I just thought if I do the right thing, I'm going to feel good. Well, turned out that wasn't the case. I thought that I was making all the wrong decisions because I was feeling worse and worse over time. And this ultimate destiny that I believed I was headed toward or would be headed toward never appeared. And then I discovered something. I discovered it wasn't the choices I was making, the actions I was taking in the world, career choices. It wasn't my choice of what religion I belong to, spiritual path. That wasn't what was determining whether I was happy, sad, depressed, anxious, free, open. That was not the determining factor for me. I was choosing to stay stuck in past events. So one way of saying it would be I was choosing my depression. And I know that's a controversial statement, or to say that I was choosing my anxiety. I was choosing, but that's not quite right. And so that's not what I'm saying. Once the anxiety started, it wasn't that I was choosing to be anxious. Who would choose that? Who would choose to live a life of with a lack of passion? Who would choose to live a life that included frequent bouts of depression? Who would choose to feel unfulfilled? Who would choose to drink too much? Who would choose to use drugs at a much earlier stage in my life? Who would choose those things? It wasn't that I was choosing to be anxious, to struggle so much. It wasn't that I was making the wrong choices either, as far as like action that I was taking. The issue was that I had made earlier choices and that kind of crystallized for me. My autonomy was taken by my autonomy. So at an earlier stage in my life, and also later stages, but specifically I'm talking about early stages, I made choices, the best choices I could make in childhood. Those choices crystallized something in me, and then I suffered. The anxiety was the crystallization of an early choice in life. And I'm not saying it was a fully informed choice. I'm not saying that someone told me, hey, or I knew, hey, you make this choice now at 6 years old and you're going to be anxious the rest of your life. That's not what I mean by choice. I wasn't choosing anxiety in that moment, but something traumatic happened, or many traumatic things over the years. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't have a sounding board, and I feel like I didn't have anyone around me that was giving me advice or helping me on that path to navigate these difficult situations. In fact, the people around me were the cause of those situations. So I made the best choice I could, and those choices led to a life of anxiety, depression, panic attacks. And so, in a sense, I chose my reaction, but in another sense, I didn't. I was doing the best I could. And then the anxiety crystallized. So, and I'm not going to try to give, I mean, I could try to give an example, but I'm not here to explain so much. And yeah, I'm explaining right now. I'm explaining how my anxiety developed, but it's really just kind of theoretical. That's not the important point. That's not the important point at all. But the idea is that at that early stage in life, 6 years old, that's really where the core wound was for me. I made a choice unknowingly that led to the crystallization of the habits and thinking patterns that resulted in anxiety and depression for me. And that crystallized, and I no longer had a choice. Where the choice came in is a few years ago. Well, yeah, it's gotta be, I really need to look it up, but it's at least 4 years ago, I discovered something that allowed me to release the anxiety. Now, the choice wasn't to stop feeling anxious. That's not the choice at all. The choice wasn't to stop experiencing depression. The choice was to go back to that original incident that crystallized with willingness. Number one, the most important thing, if you're gonna take notes, and you're probably not, but if you're gonna take notes, number one, to have the willingness to experience the difficult things that I bypassed unknowingly at that early time, and also later times, but most importantly, early times. To have number one, the willingness to approach those things, and then the openness to what I was gonna experience when I approached them. So not just the willingness, but openness to it. And that's it's that simple. And what I discovered is, on the topic of autonomy, what I discovered is, when I had that willingness, when I had that openness to re-experience, to take a redo basically on these early emotional incidents, once that happened, then I had real autonomy over my life, my choices, my emotions. No, I'll take that back. Not emotions, but how I react to the emotions. Emotions seem to be naturally rising up, just like this wind that you may or may not hear around me. I don't have a choice over the wind, so I'm not saying the emotions are like the wind, but to have a choice over my reaction, to have a choice over whether I was going to suffer in depression, laying on the floor, not even willing to get up and get into bed, to be so anxious I would freeze. Um, and I want to be clear, this isn't just about my anxiety and depression. That's that's kind of the dramatic expression of change that happened in my life, is dropping the anxiety and depression. But that's not all this is about. This isn't just for people that suffer from clinical anxiety or depression. This is for those who feel like they're not living the life they're destined to live. And like I said, I don't think there's a destiny. I think we get to choose, but that is a very real feeling, that feeling that we're not living up to our destiny. And in what I guess the kind of deep point here is the choices that we unknowingly make at an early age, and then also again over time. But it seems like those early choices are the deeper choices. It seems like those early choices are the choices that crystallize and cause the deepest habits to develop. What I'm saying is, once we release those choices, that freedom comes again. And so for me, once I released those early choices, once I was willing to return to the past and re-experience those emotions with openness, once that happened, I was truly free to choose. And this is the hard part. Until I released the effect of the past that was causing the anxiety, the depression, the lack of choice, the feeling of not living my destiny, until I released them, I didn't recognize that I wasn't autonomous. I wasn't making choices for myself. My anxiety, my depression, the panic attacks, they were making, and I'm not exaggerating, they were making every single choice I made in life, possible exceptions, but so few it's not even worth talking about. I wasn't choosing. And until the anxiety was totally eliminated, I'm not talking about symptom relief, I'm talking about years of release from anxiety and depression. Once that happened, I recognized that I had never made a choice, not from it, probably about 6 years old. I had never made an autonomous choice. My anxiety, my depression made those choices for me. So the difficulty is when you're in it, it from personal experience, when I was in it, I felt like I was choosing. I felt like I was making the choices that seemed to lead to the wrong place, that seemed to lead to more suffering. But it wasn't me choosing. It was the programming that had been, in a sense, installed. And I have a computer science background, so I use that computer language. But a program was installed in me, and that program was making the choices for me. The program of anxiety, depression, the panic attacks. Really, the panic attacks seemed to just be a symptom for me. So once I released that programming, I remember where I was. I'm sitting on my back porch. So it was back over here. I was in the sidewalk walking the dog, and I stopped. I had this feeling come over me, and I stopped and was kind of looking around. It was a beautiful day like today. And I recognized, oh, I know this feeling. This is how I felt when I was 6. This is how I felt when I was 5. This is how I felt before my core wound happened. Wow. It felt good. There was a kind of freedom that was there in that early childhood. And I recognize not everybody had that. Some people were born into trauma and maybe never experienced that. So I recognize there's some privilege there for me that I got to experience 6 years of kind of beautiful openness and creativity. And I recognize not everyone has that. But for me, I felt that freedom, that autonomy, that limitless possibility for the first time since I was 6, standing there holding the dog leash, just stopping in the middle of the sidewalk. But then the next thing that dawned on me in that moment was, holy shit, I've never made a choice. Since 6 years old, I've never made a choice. My anxiety made my choices. It felt like I was standing in an open field. I'm just imagining at the time, and even now, imagining standing in an open field, and there's beautiful tall grass and wildflowers, and the wind is blowing like it is today, golden sun shining down, these blue clouds, or blue sky, the clouds overhead. And I get to choose, which direction am I going to walk? What am I going to do? Am I going to build a cabin out here? I, for the first time in my life, recognized, first time since 6 years old, I get to choose, and I have no idea how to do it. My anxiety had been making those decisions for me. And now that I was free from it, what the heck am I supposed to do now? How am I going to choose? My anxiety had chosen drug abuse, alcohol, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, pain, suffering. It made all the wrong choices for me. And it's beautiful to have the choice, but now what do I do? Now what do I do? And I'm not saying it was a bad thing. I wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do?" But it was like, "Oh, I have no idea. I guess I should learn how to make choices." Or that was my first thought. My second thought after being released from anxiety, depression was, "Oh, I guess I get to choose how I'm going to act, and I'm gonna choose if I wanna be install programming in a sense in myself. Now that the old programming is gone, I don't know what to do, so I can choose to install programming, or I can find a way, to choose without that programming," and that's really what I chose, is that second option. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, like, habits and building, a program up. It can be so helpful to have a kind of routine, and I am the kind of person that I'm saying this, this isn't true, but I'm the kind of person that gets up at exactly this time and does this and then that and then that, and that's beautiful. That's just not what I'm drawn to, and I recognize there are people that is the natural way that they operate, and for me, the way I operate is choosing every moment. So what am I going to choose? I don't run on a program. I don't want to run on a program. As beautiful as it is, and as much as I've been drawn to it in the past, it doesn't work. So for me, it was, well, I believe in reason. Now, I don't think reason is the end all be all, but I believe reason can help me here. If I'm not being forced by anxiety or depression to make decisions, my personal choice was, I'm going to use reason. I can think ahead and think, okay, if I make this choice here, if I decide to, I don't know, uh, let my driver's license lapse, as an example, I may get pulled over, and when I get pulled over, there's going to be a consequence, and I'm gonna have to pay a really big ticket, and then I'm gonna have to go through. I'm gonna waste all this time with court potentially in the BMV, and so I can think ahead, or I can choose, do I want to, I don't drink anymore, but do I want to take a drink or a few drinks and then drive? And what are the potential consequences? So reason is a beautiful, beautiful tool for operating in the world. So reason, yeah, I can, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use reason. Emotions can actually be a great tool. They are a shortcut to reason. The emotions, instinct, intuition, it's a beautiful shortcut. When there's not time to reason, when it's an emergency, as an example, we act on instinct and we act on impulse. And once I cleared out the anxiety and depression, I could feel the natural impulse come up. And when it's not an emergency, I can choose, hey, do I follow the impulse, or do I think about it, or how do I react? Most of the time, the emotions were the emotional reaction. The impulse was great. That was the choice to make. That was the efficient choice. And then so that's reason. And the other side is, okay, the Bible says know a tree by its fruit. So I look at people around me that are doing the things, living in the way that I want to live, and I look at their choices, and then I can reason from there. Okay, is that a choice? What are they doing? What works for them? So books could be a great way to do that. I used books as a tool before the healing happened, and they had limited effectiveness. But once the anxiety, and that's because, like I said, the anxiety was controlling. And so reading some beautiful sentences that probably had really good advice in some self-help books or spiritual books, it wasn't going to do anything for me. It wasn't going to work because the anxiety was the base level of programming. It was first, what does the anxiety say to do? Well, maybe first, what am I going to choose to do based on what I've read in this book? But very quickly, the anxiety takes over. And so self-help, totally pointless before the healing happened. Even spiritual practices, honestly, kind of pointless until the healing happened. And I know that could be controversial for people that are religious, people that have a certain spiritual path. And I'm not saying this is right for everyone, but for me, I had to get the healing first. I had to get the healing before things like, I don't know, affirmations worked. I had to get the healing first before meditation worked. not quite accurate. Meditation did a lot for me, but it didn't erase the programming of anxiety, the programming of depression. It gave me symptom relief, but it didn't erase that programming. It didn't give me a real healing. All the years of meditation weren't wasted prior to the healing, but they didn't get me moving in autonomy, except to a limited extent for limited periods of time. So once the healing came, then I was open to greater possibility. I was open to what spirituality, even religion, the best of what they have to offer. I was open to the divine. I was open to possibility. I was open to choice. And so that made everything new. And that doesn't mean it's for everybody that way. It doesn't mean that everybody is going to have that same experience. So now, 3-4 years after my last bout of anxiety, my last panic attack, I think that's at least 4 years, last depressive episode. And when I say last, none, zero. I didn't think it was possible. I thought I was going to die broken. Now, years removed. This isn't like I felt good for 2 weeks. There were plenty of 2-week periods where I felt good, even a month here and there where I felt good, where I read some book and I got energized and I was pumped up and I found this new meditation method and I feel good, but it never lasted more than, typically it was about 2 weeks. There was a curve for it. Sometimes I could stay up feeling good for about a month, 6 weeks potentially, but there was always a curve. By the end of the 6 weeks, it was gone. But once I found that healing, once I discovered, and this happened after the healing happened, I expected it. I expected the other shoe to drop. So, oh gosh, I'm feeling the best I've ever felt in my life. And so a couple of weeks later, I'd pause. Something would happen that would normally trigger me, and I'd pause, like waiting for the reaction to come up, the programmed response, and it didn't. Whoa. I like literally jumped when that first happened. Oh, wow. This is the first time in my adult life, the first time since potentially 6 years old that this trigger came up and I didn't react. Wow. First time. And when I say the trigger came up, I probably had moments where I wouldn't be triggered because I could bypass successfully or I had enough symptom relief that I was okay. But when I really felt the trigger come in and nothing happened, it was ridiculous. There were times I cried because I didn't even know it was possible. I just thought I would be able to overcome the triggers in the sense of, oh, I feel triggered, but I'm not gonna react. I'm saying the triggering event happened, and that's it. It's the end. That was autonomy. So, like other areas of my life, if I had been asked, and I do ask people this that I work with individually, if I had asked, what would be a miracle? What would be a miracle for your mental health? If I'd asked myself that, or if somebody had asked me that back then, that miracle would have been stage 1 out of 10 of what eventually happened in my life. Same thing with my wife. I have a list. Maybe someday I'll do a video on that. I have a list here on my phone, on my computer, a list of the qualities I'm looking for in a partner. And they were at the time, I'm like, if I had 6 out of 8, I think there are 8 of them. If I had 6 out of 8, man, that would be a miracle. And then the healing happened. I was in the right place, the right time. And I met my wife, and I am so thankful. I am so thankful that I didn't get what I asked for. I'm so thankful I didn't receive what I asked for, because it's just like a 1 out of 10 compared to what I actually received. That's just an example of, in my life, what I thought if I had been asked what was a miracle, it would have been a 1 out of 10. It is a 10 and has been for years now. If you're listening this far along, I don't think anybody's on the live stream at this point, but if you're listening to the replay and this makes you uncomfortable, this pisses you off, I'm different. Do you feel that? That's okay. You get to choose. But what if it's also possible for you? It's that willingness I talked about earlier. The first requirement is willingness. It sounds so simple. And I think back to the way I was thinking, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And I would have said, of course I'm willing to heal. I, I was willing to feel better. It's a big difference between the two. I was willing to feel better. But I see it a lot. I especially saw it myself. I was willing to feel better, but was I willing to change? And it's not that the change brought the healing. That's the funny thing. The healing brought the change. Like I've said, I was acting on a program. So the change wasn't going to happen by itself, but I wasn't willing to change. I wanted to be who I was. I wanted to be an egomaniac. I wanted to be somebody who felt like they were always in control, but I didn't want to suffer. And so that's what I mean by willingness. It's the willingness to drop what I become attached to, this identity that I became attached to. That's the kind of willingness I'm talking about. If you're suffering, anxiety, depression, if you're not suffering, but you're not living up to what you feel like would be your potential, are you actually willing to change? Not are you willing to be successful? Not are you willing to have peace in your life? I think people are willing to do that. Most of us. I was willing to do that, but I wanted to be the same ego without the depression, without the anxiety. It was never going to work. It was never going to work. It was never going to work. So that's what I mean by willingness. The willingness to surrender. And that's the better word. Surrender. Willingness to surrender. Was I willing to surrender to what is instead of what I wanted things to be? That was the key. That was the wedge driven in the door of healing. That was the first step toward autonomy, is the willingness to surrender. It wasn't surrender. Surrender didn't come right away. Surrender, man, that's a great topic. I'm not going to get into it. I think I'm going to end this live in about a few minutes. But was I willing to surrender? So willingness to surrender. It's first just willingness, then willingness to surrender, then surrender. But I'm talking about autonomy. So how are surrender and autonomy related? Because they seem contradictory, right? If I surrender to what is, then where's the autonomy? Well, that's part of it. And there's layers to autonomy and, different stream. But autonomy operates within a field, the field of what is. And autonomy is a recognition of the variables that can be controlled around me. Mostly once the healing happened, definitely not before the healing, or to a limited extent. Mostly I get to control my reactions, assuming there's not any programming in the way that's kind of running the show for me. I get to choose my reactions. I get to choose my next step, my physical step. What I don't get to choose is other people's reactions, the way they feel, the way they think, in any way, shape, or form. I do not and don't want to, frankly, control that. I can't control most of the physical universe. I have limited control. I can pick up my phone. I can move this mic. I can choose to start this live. I can notice the rope hanging over here. Everything's mirrored. The rope hanging over here swinging and thinking, you know what? Right after this, I'm going to move that. So when I do a live tomorrow, it's not blowing in the wind. I can choose, but recognizing the scope of choice, the field of choice around me, is another part of autonomy. It's not thinking, and I'm talking from a certain level of autonomy. There's deeper levels of autonomy, but as a human being in a body, I have limited choice. I can rearrange matter, but there are mostly that's just cosmetic change. I can't change the laws of physics in this human body. Maybe there's something, there's something beyond, but my kind of everyday autonomy is very limited. It's a big part of autonomy is recognizing the field of choice and then making those choices without the programming running. So the moral of today's, the point of this stream, we get to choose. But for me, at least, and probably for the people I've worked with one-on-one, yeah, if you have the willingness to surrender, part of surrender, erasing that early programming that leads to the suffering, that leads to the apparent lack of choice, is about being willing to re-experience the emotion, fully experiencing it, passing through it, and then moving on. And for me, and for the people that come into my office doing one-on-one sessions, retrocession was a process that works. It is a process that works, and it's being refined every day. Retrocession works. It worked for me. It's worked for other people that come to me. Retrocession is a simple method that I facilitate for people one-on-one and also in groups. And I even do some online. It's a method for those who are willing to let go of the hold of the past on our present action, to essentially erase the programming. It's like if you have an app on your phone and it's running in the background and it's causing havoc on the phone, or if you have a virus on your computer, you erase it. That's what this is. And when I say erase, I mean erase permanently. This isn't symptom relief. This isn't, oh, I have this programming and I learned how to override it and put a new program on top of it that, yeah, that old programming is running, but I'm putting a new one on top. I am talking about permanently erasing the programming of the past. And there's so much more I could say about it. I'm going to move on from there. You can link in bio. I'm on various platforms right now. I think all of them. There should be a link in bio, but worst case, find me on social media. Direct message me. If you can't find the website, retrocession.org, retrocession.org. That's actually the old website. Freedom.retrocession.org is the new site. And I kind of had to have two sites in parallel because I'm doing it myself. And I needed to have the one up while the other one came up. But freedom.retrocession.org is the newest site, and it's better than the old one. But either way, retrocession.org or freedom.retrocession.org. Reach out to me on social media. You can schedule with me, free 15 minutes. It's never 15. It's free 30 minutes. If what I'm talking about resonates and you don't have the financial resources, please reach out. This isn't about money. This is not about money in the least. I want to help. Once I experience that freedom, I recognize very quickly, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. After a entire adult life of feeling like I like all these things, but I'm not doing the thing I'm called to do, I finally found the thing I'm called to do. And that's to help people find that autonomy, whether in business, in their personal life, whether releasing anxiety or achieving what they've always dreamed of achieving. That is my calling. There's no doubt I'm here to do it. And I would love to talk to you. We can just talk. We can message back and forth. Let's talk. If the willingness is there, let's go. Thanks for watching. And I'd love to talk to you. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy if you're in a place where the weather is like it is here.